In this video, I'll be sharing everything you need to know to make the most of your first trip to Brussels, the capital of Belgium, and a city that many people actually end up hating on their first go because they don't know how to plan for it properly, myself included. Now, in case you're new here, hi, I'm Christina from happytowander.com, and this channel is all about practical travel tips from someone who's been there, done that, so be sure to like and subscribe if that sounds like your kind of thing. So let's get started with some Brussels travel planning tips. First, you should definitely know the difference between Brussels' two airports before you book your flights. When you fly into Brussels, you'll usually be flying either into the main Brussels airport, BRU, or to the Brussels South Charleroi airport, whose airport code is CRL. Charleroi is definitely a good option for those who are flying from somewhere else in Europe, or perhaps those who are on a budget, because this airport does service a lot of budget airlines like Ryanair and Wizz Air, so you are very likely to find good deals. That said, it is important you know that Charleroi is actually an hour away from Brussels and they don't have a train station of their own. So if you fly into that airport, you will need to take a shuttle to get into the city. So be sure to factor that extra cost into your budget. Of course, the main Brussels airport does also service some budget airlines, so just be aware that there are two different airports and don't get them mixed up. In terms of accommodation, something I can definitely recommend is booking a hotel that is in the city center, because honestly, the center of Brussels is very compact and walkable. So if you want to maximize your time in the city, staying somewhere central is of course going to help you do that. Generally speaking, some good areas to book in include near Grand Place, which is of course the most expensive, but as central as it gets. Le Sablon, which is still very central, but very beautiful and a little bit quieter. And around the European Quarter, which is a very safe neighborhood. Though it's not the most exciting, you will find quite a few good deals here, including the Motel 1 Brussels, which is where I stayed on a recent trip, and honestly, in terms of value for money, it's hard to beat. On a similar note, you should also be aware of certain areas that you don't want to be booking accommodation in Brussels. Brussels does have many lovely neighborhoods and areas, but it also has certain areas that you definitely want to avoid, especially as a first-time visitor. Though I am by no means an expert on safety in Brussels, I have been there and stayed there enough times to kind of have an idea from my own personal experience which areas I would avoid in the future. So here are a few. Molenbeek, which is a fairly infamous area of Brussels that has a fairly negative reputation in terms of petty crime and pickpockets. And there's also Kirchem, which is around the Brussels Midi station, which also has a pretty bad reputation. And having stayed there one night on a kind of stopover, I would definitely not recommend it. I felt super unsafe just walking to my rental apartment from the station, and I'm pretty sure there was actually someone following me. So again, not ideal, especially if you're traveling on your own. Now, in terms of how long to stay in Brussels, this might be a controversial opinion, but honestly, if it's your first visit and you're only planning to do the main sites, 1 to 2 days is honestly enough. Of course, you can easily spend more time here. There are so many cool museums and places to explore, so it wouldn't be tough to spend a few extra days. But for me personally, if you're just trying to do the main sites, 1 to 2 days is enough. And if you have more time, what I would recommend is actually going out of Brussels and exploring another city in Belgium, or if you have the time, multiple other cities in Belgium, because there are so many great ones. Bruges, Antwerp, and Ghent are all very easy to reach from Brussels, and they're all amazing and worth seeing. Now let's move on to Brussels tips for transport and getting around. First, as I mentioned before, most of the main sites in Brussels are actually really within walking distance of each other. So my personal opinion is the best way to get around Brussels is just simply on foot and using some public transport in between to bridge the gaps. All that said, if you think you need public transport during your time in Brussels, it's very easy to pay because actually their system does accept contactless payments. So you can easily pay with a contactless card, like a debit or credit card, or you can even use digital wallets like Apple Pay. Those who think they might need public transport more often can also look into a 10-journey pass, which works out to be much cheaper than buying single trips. But this really only makes sense if you plan on taking a lot of public transport, like if you have a longer stay, or again, if you're staying a bit farther out. Next, do know that there are actually 3 main train stations in Brussels, and it can get confusing because they have different names in French and in Flemish. So always double check the name of the station before you disembark or before you start planning your journey to catch your train, because these 3 stations aren't actually that close to each other, so you want to make sure you don't accidentally go to the wrong station, because guess who's done that before? So just to make sure we're all on the same page, there is of course the Brussels Central Station, also known as Bruxelles Centrale or Brussels Central. Sorry, I don't speak Flemish, so excuse my pronunciation. There's also Brussels South Station, also known as Gare du Midi or Zuidstation. And Brussels North Station, also known as Gare du Nord or Noordstation. When in doubt, always give it a quick Google before you leave. Now let's move on to the next tip, which is for my younger viewers, and it's gonna save you a lot of money. And that's if you're under 26, then you're actually eligible for something called the Go Pass 1. And so this is a really amazing train ticket that you can use in Belgium that lets you buy a train ticket essentially anywhere in the country for only €6.40. The day that I aged out of that program, I was tremendously sad, so take advantage of it. Now let's move on to Brussels tips for attractions. First and most importantly, be sure to lower your expectations for some of the more common guidebook attractions that people always recommend for Brussels. As I said before, Brussels is an awesome city, but the trouble is a lot of guidebooks and resources really don't do it justice. Especially on my first visit, what I remember was I just went on TripAdvisor, looked at the top 10, just went from one peeing statue to the next, and ate overpriced waffles in the center and was just surrounded by other tourists who were doing the exact same thing. Instead of doing this, what I encourage you to do is, yes, tick these main attractions off your list, but then expand your search and go out into other neighborhoods outside of the very city center, check out local blogs for more offbeat recommendations, visit some quirky museums, and overall just get a feel for what people who live in Brussels like to do. Because I assure you, it's not going to see the mannequin piss. Next, if you do plan on doing a lot of paid sightseeing and visiting all those museums I've been talking about, it does really make sense for you to get a Brussels card, because this one card gets you access to most of the main museums in the city, and if you go to a few of them, it does even out to be way cheaper. But as usual, make sure you are doing the math, because unless you're going to a few different attractions, it might not actually be worth it. On one of my visits though, I definitely wanted to see as many museums as possible, so this card probably saved me, I'm not even joking, over €100 in value. So it can definitely be worth it if you know how to maximize the value of it. Now, even if you don't get a Brussels card, I can highly recommend you visit at least one quirky or different museum when you're in Brussels. Because as I said, this city really has a museum for every interest under the sun. Some interesting ones that I really enjoyed include the Museum of Musical Instruments, the Royal Museum of Army and Military History, Auto World, and the Belgian Comic Strip Museum. But of course, pick something based on your own personal interests. Also, don't miss some of Brussels' best hidden viewpoints. The view from Mont des Arts is a well-known attraction and it is really beautiful, but it's not the only nice viewpoint in the city. There are definitely some lesser-known viewpoints that are well worth checking out if you have the time. Some of my personal favorites include from the 5th floor cafeteria of the Royal Library of Belgium, and from the 10th floor restaurant at the Museum of Musical Instruments. Next, let's move on to some food and drink tips for Brussels. First, definitely avoid eating on Rue des Bouchers and other tourist trap restaurants. This notorious little street in Brussels is known for its pushy restaurateurs, inflated tourist prices, and subpar food. As my tour guide emphasized, this street is home to some of the worst restaurants in Brussels. Unfortunately though, because of their big English menus and their very pushy servers up front, this street is a natural trap for tourists. So definitely steer clear of them and make sure you're reading reviews before you sit down anywhere. Some evident signs that you might be at a tourist trap restaurant include if there's a very pushy server or worker at the front trying to get you to come in, if there are big signs with lots of pictures of the menu, if they have menus in a million languages up front, and if they have any big signs that are advertising things like free Wi-Fi or tourist menu or English menu. Now, another random tip is if you're planning on shopping for chocolate, which of course you will, first thing, chocolate in Brussels is very expensive, especially if you're getting the good stuff. So do be prepared for that. But more importantly, if you're shopping for chocolate, do not do it at the Galerie Saint-Hubert. I personally love this area. The Galerie Saint-Hubert is super beautiful and is home to a number of prestigious chocolate shops. But the trouble is, it can get very, very busy there, and you are not going to have a peaceful experience shopping for chocolate here because there will be hundreds of other tourists trying to do the same. Now here's a secret. A lot of the chocolate shops that are in that passageway are chains, and there will probably be another location in Brussels that are selling the exact same chocolates. So if you want a more peaceful experience, pick a chocolatier that you like the look of and then have a quick search on Google Maps to see if there are other locations of that same shop. There probably will be, and I promise you those ones will be way less busy than the ones in this passageway. If you're looking for a nicer way to enjoy the Galerie Saint-Hubert, I recommend getting an overpriced coffee and getting to actually sit down and enjoy the surroundings because it is really beautiful, but chocolate shopping there is very stressful. Now, another skill you should learn when you go to Brussels is learning to identify which waffle stands are going to give you mediocre waffles. Now, I know that sounds impossible, but yes, you can have bad waffles in Brussels, and a lot of the touristy places will charge you a premium for waffles that are just okay. And usually you'll find these bad waffles in the touristy center because they are targeting tourists who just don't know better. So here's some tips to keep in mind. First, avoid any generic looking waffle places that just have big signs that advertise based on price, like €1 waffle, best price in the city, or any ones that lure you in with the plastic models of waffles. Most of the time, these ones are geared towards tourists and are probably not going to be the best quality. At these stalls, you'll generally find two different types of waffles. The Liège style waffle, which tend to be more circular, a lot denser, a lot chewier, and they are usually served plain because they're already studded with these little bits of pearl sugar, so they're really tasty and you can actually eat them just handheld without any utensils. There's also the Brussels style waffle, which tends to be rectangular and is kind of in this grid-like shape. These ones tend to be fluffier and are more commonly served with toppings. A giveaway that you're in a more touristy place might be that if you see Liège style waffles and in the displays they have a bunch of toppings on them, that is probably a good hint as well that they are targeting tourists because, as I said before, Liège style waffles are perfect on their own. Now, I know these are some super specific tips, but if you're still with me and you enjoy this level of detail, be sure to let me know by commenting waffles in the comments. Another important food and drink tip is, of course, to take advantage of the Belgian beer scene in Brussels. Fun fact, I actually used to hate beer until I went to Brussels, and to me, there was nothing else to do but drink, and now I love beer, so there you go. Belgian beer is world famous for a reason, and one of the best things to do in Brussels, especially in the evening, is enjoying this beer scene. Some recommendations for you. I do think that Delirium Cafe is a must, even though it's super touristy. This bar is well known for having the Guinness World Record of the largest selection of beers on site. So there's literally thousands of beers and you can browse this binder that has all these beers that you can choose from. You're definitely going to be surrounded by tourists here, but it's a very unique and fun experience that's worth checking out. For a more historic vibe, I also really like À la Mort Subite. And of course, there's plenty of more modern places to enjoy a beer as well. There's no shortage of bars in Brussels, so be sure to look into the different options. Another thing when you're in Brussels is, of course, to try as much Belgian cuisine as you can. No doubt you'll already be trying some classics like chocolate, Belgian fries, not French fries, Belgian fries, and waffles. But beyond that, there are some main courses that I honestly think are so delicious. So some of my personal favorites include vol au vent, which is a creamy meat stew served in a crispy pastry, carbonade flamande, which is a rich beef stew made with beer, moules frites, which are mussels with fries, and mussels in Brussels is a cute rhyme. And I really like boulettes à la liégeoise, which are juicy meatballs in a sweet and savory sauce, served with a hearty helping of Belgian fries. And of course, do make sure to go beyond Belgian cuisine as well, because Brussels is actually one of the most international cities in the world. So there's a lot of global fare to be enjoyed beyond just Belgian classics. I've personally had really good ramen consistently in Brussels, and I've probably tried every major ramen place in the city center by now. If you're looking for a recommendation, I've really enjoyed Takumi Tonkotsu ramen. And if you're in the mood for Thai, I also liked Siam Square. Now finally, here are some tips for once you arrive in Brussels. First, while Brussels is officially bilingual, with the two official languages being French and Flemish, you will find that on the street, day to day, you will encounter a lot more French than Flemish. So if you're looking to brush up on a certain language to use when you're in Brussels, do make sure it's French. Granted, in most touristy places, you will absolutely get by fine with just English, but I do think it's always polite to learn a few words in the local language. So if you're greeting someone, that would be bonjour during the day or bonsoir in the evening. And of course, to say thank you, that's merci. Another important tip is to bring some cash with you, just a little bit, especially in coins, because actually to use public bathrooms in Brussels, you often need to pay, and that's just true across Belgium as well. And you never know, even though most places do take cards these days, having a little bit of cash is ideal for situations like that, so that you don't get caught out. Another important tip is to avoid bringing big bags with you when you're out sightseeing. So from what I noticed, when you go into the museums in Brussels, a lot of the time they will not allow you to have a bigger backpack, and they'll force you to put your bag in a locker. And these lockers tend to be pretty small, so make sure that you're not bringing a huge day bag out with you because it might not fit and they'll definitely ask you to put it away. Next up, in terms of safety, do familiarize yourself with some common pickpocketing scams in advance of your trip. I will say generally, Brussels isn't any more dangerous than other major European cities, but especially in touristy areas, pickpockets can be an issue. So definitely make sure you know the common scams. In particular, I would make sure you don't ever have your phone just out on a table in an exposed location because it's very easy for people to just grab it off the table. Also, never leave your bags unattended. I know this sounds like common sense, but a lot of tourists just leave their shopping out while they're taking pictures, which is obviously not a great idea. Also, consider hiding your valuables somewhere safe, like in a hidden pocket or in a money belt. And beware of distractions. Oftentimes, pickpockets just thrive on the fact that you're not paying attention, so do beware if there's ever any commotion that's sudden or if people are getting close to you, then always have a hand on your valuables. I'd also say to try to blend in as much as possible when you're in Brussels. A really great part of it being such an international city is the fact that it's fairly easy to blend in. A lot of the time, pickpockets are really just going after the most obvious tourists. So there are just a few basic things that you can do to avoid making yourself a target. Like if you have an expensive camera, don't just walk around with it dangling around your neck. If you need to look for directions, pull over and stop. Don't be walking around aimlessly with a map or your phone in your hand. And also don't make yourself a target by carrying around massive bags with luxury purchases. And while I generally exercise these rules across the city, I would be especially careful close to any of the main train stations. Finally, do make sure you know where you're going and avoid getting lost when you're in Brussels. I love getting lost in new cities because it's a fun way to explore, but from personal experience, what I've noticed is in Brussels, in the city center, you can very quickly go from a pretty street that's very nice and explorable into a not so nice area. So definitely make sure you have your wits about you and you have an idea of where you're going. Again, some areas that I would personally stay away from include around De Broekere after dark, Molenbeek, and Kirchem. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope that was helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe for more travel videos just like this one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.